Thank you, Billy. Quite an introduction. Actually, I'm not here to speak tonight. I got an announcement to make. Earlier tonight, Michael Strand noted that Ella, 101 years old, he learned more from her in 10 minutes than he'd learned from anybody in 30 years. So actually, we're rushing to get Ella here to replace me, because it'll be a lot more valuable use of the next 10 minutes. But what a fantastic evening, and how wonderful to be here, and how exciting to share the stage with all these folks with great ideas, and to be here with all of you. So thank you for being here. I was a little bit actually surprised tonight. I was excited about tonight. I was nervous, but I was a little surprised that all of you showed up, because I don't know, did you hear the news from yesterday? Did anybody hear this? There was 155,000 people yesterday on Earth died. 155,000, that's about 1.8 per second, if you want to think about that. But hey, here's the good news, maybe that's why you're here. There was 362,000 people born yesterday. Okay, think about that. That is more than 2 Fargos, okay? More than 2 Fargos were born yesterday. And you might sort of say, is this a problem or is this an opportunity? I think the question, that's a good question. I think what we have to be pleased about, though, is that humans have the potential, each of us, each of you have the potential to change the world. Each of us have a chance to make just this incredible impact. Each of us have the opportunity to do things that are completely unimaginable today. That's available to all of us today. And you'd say, well, sure, he's just saying that. Just think about the world that we live in today and the communications we have. What we have today is like an insane dream that was impossible even to conceive of 30 or 40 years ago in terms of the capability. And you can pick anything, whether it's communications or healthcare or transportation. The advances that have happened because of the drivers of the microchip and software are transforming the world as we are here. And many of us then tend to think, even in the face of this massive transformation that all of us are living through, that the world is going to stay kind of the way it is. When in fact, the change is actually going to come more rapidly and be even more incredible. And when some of you young folks are my age, you're going to go, wow, this is like an insane dream. I can't believe all this has happened in the last 30 years. But I take it back a little bit, because I'm optimistic about the future, and I'm optimistic about what can happen ahead of us. But if you take back and say this thought about, who were the people? Who were the people? What were the kind of people that actually did change the course of the Earth? Who made a dent in the universe and caused it to go a different direction? And it reminds me of an individual that was trying to get a new venture started. And wasn't the prototypical young startup person, middle-aged, had this idea, crazy idea, was trying to get funding, got turned down, tried again, got turned down again, went to a different country, got turned down, went to a different country, got turned down, went to a 4th country, got turned down. All this happened over a pattern of about 7 years. Went back, revised the idea, some more things have happening in the world. Actually, it looks like because of some of the changes in the world, his idea is less needed than it was before. But he continues to persevere, and finally gets funding for his idea. And with the funding, he gets the funding. Half of it comes from private investors in Italy. The other half comes from a significant individual in Spain, and has this idea to do this thing. And he cuts this deal where, hey, I get 10% of the take of whatever comes back, and I get 1/8 of whatever this new venture produces. And part of the reason he was able to negotiate such a good deal is that actually Isabella and Ferdinand actually thought that Christopher Columbus would never come back. They thought he's not going to make it. We'll give him a big incentive. Let him go. Hey, we'll never see him again. So here's someone who could have been comfortable in his life, and was really the seminal thing that it was the journey to cross the Atlantic was this seminal journey, and there was trade going on. There, in Marco Polo, several hundred years earlier, had opened up trade routes from Europe to China. Spice trade was raging along, lots of good things happening. They'd recently figured out how to sail around the southern tip of Africa. That's why one of his funding deals fell through. Hey, we don't need to try to sail across, to the west. And by the way, didn't anybody tell you the Earth was flat? Because that was, well, some scientists believed in the concept of that time of a sun-centered universe. Many people thought everything still circled around the Earth, and other people actually thought there was an edge and that you could sail off of it. And so people weren't going to try. They weren't going to try it. So that was the conventional wisdom. And if you even were past the idea of, okay, I believe it's round, and we're a sphere and there's no edge, we're past all that whole thing. Clearly, this can't be done because the distance is too great. And if you think about, like, let's get together, a group of us together, and we're all going to fly to a distant planet, but we're not sure if that planet is there. And by the way, we can only take about 3.5 months food with us, but we think we'll get there in about 3 months. Who wants to go? Okay. Well, the good news and the bad news was a couple things happened. Columbus made 3 critical errors which aided his optimism. One is he thought that the planet was about 37% smaller than it actually is, and so therefore his calculated distance was, in his mind, was shorter. He actually thought that he was going to hit Japan if he sailed straight west, and he thought that Japan was way off the coast of China, and so that it was going to be a closer landing spot for him to hit. And he also, had miscalculated some thoughts about current and wind. So basically, he made 3 fundamental errors, any one of which he would have died. But fortunate for him, there was an entire 2 continents there that he didn't know about that were allowed him to not die and run out of food on this journey. But so what is the characteristics of some of this? And I'm not trying to say good person, bad person. I'm not trying to make a judgment. I'm just saying that prior to that time, ecologically, culturally, and others, we lived in isolation, and that was the beginning, in many ways, of the world that we live in today. An interconnected world that's become increasingly flat, that's become increasingly connected, where ideas and germs and businesses all, transmit. We're becoming one planet as opposed to a bunch of sort of isolated situations, and you can point to that point. But how does that person do that? How does that person have the ability to overcome conventional wisdom? How do they have the courage to overcome skepticism? How do they have the faith and belief in their own ideas? How do they attract people to join them and come along? And then if you look again through history of people that have those similar characteristics of, it was only about 20 years after that, in 1513, Copernicus comes up with this idea that, hey, we revolve around the sun. Does he run out and publish that? Does he get that news out? He only tells a few friends. He's afraid to tell people because the conventional wisdom, as driven in that part of the world by the church and the ideas of the church, were completely opposed to that. 100 years later, in 1633, after people have already come to America and settled at Jamestown, all these things are happening, that's when Galileo gets put on trial 100 years later for following the beliefs of a guy who all he was saying was, oh, by the way, I think we rotate around the sun instead of the other way around. And so when he was, pushing this heliocentric view of the world, people were being jailed for these kinds of ideas, heretical. And so I want to understand that, you would think today, particularly those of us that have the good fortune to live in places where we've got freedom and nutrition and wherever, that we do not have the barriers of prison or scorn or death or trial to ask questions that challenge conventional wisdom. And yet, so many people decide to go along with whatever they're fed or whatever. I'm guessing that's not you because you're here. You're here about spreading good ideas. You're curious and curious minds. And we heard earlier tonight about the importance of creativity in children. We heard about it from Dr. Sue, about Grant, about how, the curiosity of a child. And I guess what I'm saying is part of what we need is we need more and more people who are courageously curious. Let's give a couple more examples. The Wright brothers, circa beginning of this century, or last century, at that time, one of the most pervasive pieces of conventional wisdom in the world was that man would never be able to achieve mechanized flight. That was, you could ask 100 people and 100 people would say, absolutely never happen, not possible, aren't intended to, don't have the capabilities, engines aren't strong, what's a wing, so what, even if you get airborne, you can't control it. And so the Wright brothers kept asking question after question after question to try to solve the issues of power, the issues of control. I mean, the questions they asked that led to the answers are still the basic functions, pitch, yaw, roll, that pilots use today to control flight. And then you say, but then again, how do they had the courage to ask the question, but they had the perseverance to keep going. Everybody knows about the fact that at Kitty Hawk, the two Wright brothers flipped a coin. One of them gets to jump on the plane. They have a 152-foot long flight that lasts 13 seconds and man flies for the first time. We all know that. Everybody knows that, right? But do people know that they crashed gliders 900 times before they had that successful 152-foot flight? 900 times. Who invented the light bulb? Thomas Edison. Everybody knows that. Do people know that he had 2,000 experiments that failed before he successfully achieved that? And more recently, I mean, even things like, I'm sure everybody's happy to make copies. Can you make a copy? Everything's wireless, hooked to a printer. Try to explain to a kid how it goes from your computer to that thing wirelessly, and it ends up over there and comes out. Insanely magical stuff that nobody questions anymore because it just happens, bits flying through the air, and you don't even know how, you don't even have to even write a printer driver anymore. The software just works. It's crazy. And so, the guy that was inventing what became, our view of Xerox, he got turned down by 20 companies. 20 companies he got turned down before the Haloid company, which became the Xerox company, said yes. So it's this combination of deep curiosity, the curiosity of a child that you never let leave your life. It's the courage to go up against conventional wisdom, and it's the perseverance to keep on trying. Those are the qualities that are really driving and changing the world. And again, against the background of optimism, I say, why should we be optimistic today? Aren't there so many things wrong with this planet? Every day I get up and I hear in the media about everything that's wrong. Why would I be optimistic? Well, if you take a look, since the beginning of humankind, there's really the four great scourges. And we've heard about some of them tonight: poverty, famine, disease, and war. Poverty, it is in some ways, incalculably sad to think that 1 billion people, live on $2 a day or less. That's hard to think about. But it's also important to know that as a percentage of the world population, that's 13%, and that it used to be 26%, and that we're making progress against that. And most of the people that have been moved out of poverty, more people have been moved out of poverty in the last 25 years than at any point in human history. And what drove that? It was innovation. And where was the innovation driven by? Innovation was driven by free markets and by capitalism. China and India giving up on the idea that taking wealth away from a few and giving it to the rest is going to raise everyone out of poverty. When that idea was destroyed and capital markets came into those huge population areas of the world, that has been the single biggest driver. And nobody's writing a story that says capitalism saved the world. But right now, capitalism changed the lives of over 1 billion people in the last 25 years, and there's never been an invention like it that's done that. So that's the first one. Then famine. We have people like Carl Peterson that you heard from tonight, and you saw this amazing presentation about what's being done to feed the world. We have a smaller percentage of people who are malnutritious today than before. So progress, a lot of progress left to do, big challenges ahead, but because of those kinds of innovation, we did not end up with the dire circumstances. When I was a kid, the population forecasts were to be that it was going to be cataclysmic by this point in time, but we are making progress on that front. Disease, again, people thought contagion, worldwide disease, the whole scare thing. There is so much progress being made around the world in rich countries and poor countries on, lifespan is lasting longer than ever. Through Gates Foundations and the Rotary and people like that, entire classes of diseases are, for the first time in history, have the prospect of being eliminated from the planet. And then my last one, war, which again, you would think that this is a planet that never stops battling each other. And in some cases, unfortunately, that has been, through recorded history, a big point. It's what we go to school, it's what people study, is about war, war, war. But as a percentage of total population of people in war deaths, the last 50 years of the last century and the beginning of this century is the smallest percentage since before the 1500s. It went up and up and up and up, and it peaked in sort of the time frame of World War I, which was a true global catastrophe. And now we seem to have a little bit on the run. And part of it, yes, again, technology. There are still civilian deaths. There still is the tragedy of war, man's inhumanity against man, which continues on, which again, unexplainable sometimes. But it is interesting to stand back and look at it. What it went, from tribal warfare to, regional warfare to nation-state warfare has largely, in some ways, become a battle between religions. So, imagine a world where you could get beyond the conflict between various faiths that all preach faith and actually get to a place beyond that where you actually could have it. I think you can actually imagine it. You might be able to get there. Some of you in your lifetime may actually see that could happen. But again, so the four major scourges of humankind, famine, poverty, disease, and war, massive progress on all of those, and it's happening right now. It's happening in our lifetimes. I mean, this is like a joyous and amazing moment. And we have all this technology to do stuff. So what's left? What's left? Because we have this platform to actually move human potential further ahead than we've ever had before. What's left? What we need is individuals in families, in homes, in businesses, in government, in leadership positions, or just as individuals. And we need people that can ask the great and tough questions. We need people who are courageously curious, who do not put up with the status quo, who question conventional wisdom. If we hadn't questioned conventional wisdom, we wouldn't be flying today. If we hadn't questioned conventional wisdom, it might have been hundreds of years later before the world started to shrink. If you hadn't questioned conventional wisdom, we really, Steve Jobs did it every day. We wouldn't have all of the amazing products if you don't question conventional wisdom. If Bill Gates hadn't said, hey, can we eliminate an entire disease class? We wouldn't be nearly having that happen. So we all have an opportunity, but you don't have to be a Steve Jobs or Bill Gates. You can make a difference right now, and part of the way you can make a difference in the organizations you're in, create an environment for people to be curious. Because part of the courage is that there is so much resistance to people that ask the tough questions or that ask the uncomfortable questions. But if we can create an environment where people need a little less courage, maybe we get more curiosity, and that curiosity. So you can contribute lots of ways. Create a great environment for asking questions, ask great questions yourself. And part of that asking questions, you might say again, is how do I do it? The place to start is having the wisdom of the age of understanding how little we know. The Tao Te Ching talked about the true wisdom and true humility comes from not knowing, from knowing how much you don't know. The master, the Chinese master with the student, pouring the cup of tea, and the student says, but master, it's filled up, it's pouring over the side. Stop, why are you pouring it? And he says, what are you doing that? He says, that's like your mind, young one. You think you know everything, and so, I can't add anything more to it. It's you have to empty your mind. And I thought we had some, we had Dr. Sue talking about her young child. We had Michael talking beautifully about the cups tonight. And you know what the most important part of that cup is? The nothing. The middle part, without the thing that can hold the thing you put in it. Architecture, people think it's beautiful, but without the spaces on the inside that have nothing, you don't have anything. So think about cups and architecture, and then think about your brain and try to get your brain to be a little emptier, and therefore, how do I fill it up? I got to get up every day and ask great questions. When I've had the opportunity over the last dozens of years to drop kids off at school in the morning, one of the things I've been able to say instead of, have a great day, as I've always said to them, hey, ask great questions today. And that's something you can do for the people around you as well. Thank you so much.